Welcome one and welcome all to the podcast. Still unnamed, but don't worry about that. We're still working on that with the department that will not be named for legal reasons. They are a shadow corporation within our company that is responsible for all of our media outlets, and we are forbidden from saying their name out loud, so I will refrain. I would like to start this episode by reading the memo that was sent to me. Let's see, who is this from? This is from, this is from staff, just in general, just staff. That's nice. No name to go along with it. And it reads thusly. Someone has been stealing all of the snacks from the vending machines and replacing them with small pieces of paper with the names of random employees. Oh, okay. Any information on this would be welcome. Please inform the staff so we can catch this individual and stop them from doing it. So far, nothing strange has happened. It's just sort of weirding everyone out. Signed, the staff. Okay, well, that's delightful. Just another odd item in a long list of creepy things that happen in this building. I am joined today by Caleb. Say hello, Caleb.
Hello.
And remind me, what department in the company do you work in?
Well, I work in our research laboratory, specializing in how to get humans back into space.
Get humans back into space? What do you mean by that?
I mean, we've been to the moon. You can't tell me you believe in conspiracy theories that literally disagree with proven hard facts.
Oh, absolutely not. So, are we going back to the moon, or what's the operation
I mean,
here?
the moon would just be a starting point. Certainly, we'll get back into the moon, but if we've been in space, it's been far too many decades, and so I was tasked within this company to help do some research and initialize the projects for us to get back into space. Moon, sure, but we're talking. Let's go beyond even just the couple planets that most people learn in school. We're going to explore. There's far too many sci-fi movies. We know this stuff has got to be real out there somewhere. So that's my job.
Interesting. Well, that explains this episode is happening, of course, in the planetarium, which I got to be honest, I didn't know the company had a planetarium.
I mean, this is somewhat of it's a research that, let's just say, we're not going to broadcast it to everybody. There's a lot of
Gotcha.
haters. There's a lot of doubters.
Gotcha.
And honestly, I don't need all of that distraction going on. So we keep the planetarium a relatively hush-hush in the company.
I actually have a fun little talking point because you're a bit of a writer, and by a bit, I mean you're absolutely a writer.
I try.
Remind me, do you have like a personal record for how many words in like a month span that you've done?
Oh, no, I don't think I would say I have a record. Maybe 10,000 words in a month.
That's still impressive.
Yeah, so this is also factoring, so that's writing my particular fantasy sort of projects, right? So I tend to write roughly, I don't know, 2,500 to 3,500 words a week for work.
Right.
So I probably, as far as typing is concerned, type somewhere between 15 and 20,000 words. But as far as creative mindset, I probably do creative writing. I probably average more like 3,000 words a month, but I'm pretty certain I've hit 10.
Your poor keyboard, man.
Yeah, well, I use multiple keyboards. I did kill a laptop, if that counts.
Oh my gosh. Do you have any specific keys that always go out first? Because since I use my keyboard a lot for gaming, my WASD keys and my shift key always end up dying.
Undoubtedly, yeah. So in a lot of gaming aspects, shift tends to be stealth or crouch or something like that. So shift can very easily go out. And definitely the WASD. For me, it's often the space bar. I hit space a lot. And then I hit backspace a lot, but the way I hit space with my left thumb, pretty much always my left thumb. There, like especially on my work computer, you can see where all of the fingerprint oils have left this residue. I've tried cleaning it off with alcohol wipes, and I've left a mark on the keyboard from my left thumb on the space bar.
I mean, between me and my brother, we like wore grooves into our previous keyboard. Like,
Oh
I don't
yeah.
know if that speaks mostly to the poor quality of the keyboard itself, or just a testament to the amount that we were using it. But we destroyed that poor keyboard. Not after it wasn't very long. It wasn't long for this world. Going along with writing stuff, because I wanted to get into this a little bit. I had a random thought earlier today, and I wanted to run it by you. I'm not even sure if I have answers to this question yet. I wanted to talk about tropes, and
Yeah.
specifically your favorite and least favorite tropes.
Ah,
Obviously, it
yes.
doesn't have to be like your number ones, but even if you
Yes.
just mention some that you like, that
Right.
you tend to write or tend to avoid. I just wanted to pick your brain about that.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess there's a little bit of a difference, I will say, from what I tend to write versus what I tend to love.
Hmm.
So I'll explain this, right? So I love certain tropes. I don't know how to pull them off through writing, and it amazes me when authors can pull it off so well. So I'll go with like one of my favorites, right? I love the grumpy man child mentorship bonding.
Okay.
Right? So you get this Mandalorian plus Grogu. You
Okay.
get this The Witcher Geralt plus Ciri. A little bit in Game of Thrones, you've got the Hound plus Arya Stark. Like there's this motif of I man, it's been in a lot of the Star Wars shows too. You get this kind of the like I mean, not necessarily even grumpy, but they're like gruffy. They're typically quieter,
World weary.
um, world weary, and then along comes a young child, and okay, Obi-Wan plus Leia and Kenobi.
Okay.
Right? They're tired, they're depressed, they've seen so much in their lives, and they've survived it all. And then something young, innocent, in need of protection comes along, they become the protector. So I absolutely love that trope. Like that's a cream of the crop top 5 trope for me.
My mind immediately goes to like Rocky or Up.
Exactly. Yes. So that's the exact pairing. Actually, I'll be honest, I've not seen Rocky. But I'm familiar with that concept. Certainly Up. Yes, you are on track. That's where my mind goes. I love that pairing.
Okay. All right. I can respect that. For me personally, I mean, Up is probably one of my favorite Pixar films. It doesn't quite beat out Incredibles for me, but I love
Sure.
that dynamic like you're talking about with this older man and then this very young kid where two entirely different ways of viewing the world. You have one person who is at the end of their life and another person who is still just so full of life that they sort of bounce off each other, where I think is Carl Fredricksen, the old man, is sort of trying to ground this kid, but the
Right.
kid is trying to pull this old man out of his, I guess, his like apathy and
Mm-hmm.
his sedentary lifestyle, and this sort of makes them both better. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes. So that is commonly found throughout literature and definitely one of my go-tos. If I see that that is present, I'm down for it.
As far as like tropes that not necessarily that you wish would just cease to exist altogether, because I feel like there's a definite closeness between tropes that you're tired of and tropes
Mm-hmm.
that are super popular because
Yeah.
they just get done to death. But are there any
Sure.
tropes where you're just like, whenever you start to see a story head that direction, you just sort of roll your eyes and you're like, well, I know exactly where this is going?
Right. Yes. So let me highlight this through the way again through what I love, which is why I dislike these other tropes. And what I am working on through my own personal fantasy project. I love friends to lovers.
Okay.
So, right, I love people who have a relationship, they have a history, maybe they grew up together, maybe they serve in the same careers, and they're friends to lovers. I love it. I'm here for it all the time.
Mm.
What that means, though, is I absolutely despise um, love triangles. Love
Okay.
triangles are a big no-no in my book. I've seen a couple play out okay, but by and large, it is literally a waste of literature to me. You'll read, let's say, a 600-page book, and the female protagonist is in love with two different male protagonists who both love her back. And a third of the book is dedicated to someone who will not get the girl. Um, and that is a waste of space and timing. And so I dislike that. I particularly dislike the one that literally could never be ever published again, and I would be happy, is when the character, male or female, leaves their current love interest to go back to their old high school flame, first love, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it makes me so mad to watch someone in a happy relationship, and the writer of the story is like, what if we made their happy life turn miserable because of their own old urges, and let's make their life suck, and then let's make it good again because they found true love that they originally had.
Right.
I don't like it. It's not for me. I know some people love it.
Do you feel like it sort of invalidates a lot of the character struggle and character development if it's like, ultimately, I'm just going to take you back to square one. Like, you never should have left this small town.
Yes.
You never should have left this person. It sort of just, like, invalidates a lot of their life experience.
Yes, so this is character regression at its finest.
That's and actually, a good way of putting
it. The reason that I dislike Star Wars The Force Awakens, it's not because it was just a rehash of A New Hope. I can live with that. You know what works, you stuck with the formula, I can respect it. It's not the fact that they use some weird humor. While I don't love all the funny lines, Star Wars has been known to have quirky humor. I can get it. I accept it. What I dislike is they took all of the original characters and just said, let's put them back as if they never grew whatsoever from when we first met them. So Han Solo, you were a father, you were a husband. Let's just say you gave up on your wife and your kid and you decided to go back to smuggling goods. Leia, you were a leader as well as a mother and a wife, and let's just say, you're just going to lead. And
you're like Luke, a politician again.
You grew up on a desert planet. Let's just send you into exile. So, you took all these characters and said, let's just pretend all of the growth that has happened just didn't happen after 35 years.
Huh.
That's a really
like interesting
regression.
Take. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and this you'll see it in a lot of places where, if someone is living a stable life and then they're willing to throw away their stable lives to what existed in the past, it's regression, and I don't like it.
No, that's really good. Because honestly, it does feel untrue to the characters, where any show you watch where a character makes a decision and you as the audience, you as the viewer, are thinking to yourself, well, why on earth would that character make that decision? And you can just sort of hear the clacking of the writer's typewriter, where you're like, I can just feel the author wrenching them away from what makes sense. And it's like, you can just sort of feel the author imposing their will on well-developed characters that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and so on one level, I understand truly in reality, people do that, right? So we get this Bible scripture about a dog returning to its vomit.
Right, yep.
Right? So there is a reality. Yes, sometimes people do regress. I guess what I particularly dislike is when that is praised. Again, so when you leave your current partner to go back to your previous partner, and that is praised as the right decision, I don't like that.
It almost feels like fatalistic as far as romance is. He's like, what was the point of all this story and all this struggle and all this everything, all these pages, if it's just this is going to happen, whether the reader wants it to or not, whether the character wanted it or not.
Right. So yeah, that's probably in my highest of high disliked tropes.
Okay, so I have another question, somewhat writing related, and we'll see how complex it gets. As far as, because I know that you're big into stories that have dragons in them, and I guess not just stories, but just media in general. Yes. I'm sort of curious. I just had this thought, because I wanted to talk about dragons, but then I started thinking about their representation in media, right? Whether it's books or everything. In my mind, I don't know why I've never thought about this, but the way that dragons are portrayed, it's like they're always portrayed in like one of two ways. So I feel like a lot of older media, dragons like in stories are just these wild beasts that kill indiscriminately. They're animals. They're just large
Yes.
lizards that breathe fire. And then at some point along the way, and I don't know who's responsible for this, and this is kind of what I wanted to ask you about, is at some point along the line, the dragon becomes more like humans, which I
Mm-hmm.
think makes them more terrifying
Mm.
because now their choices, they're making it's not just an animal acting on instinct. They can
Mm-hmm.
be greedy, they can be vengeful, they can hold grudges, they hoard gold. It's like once you add a weird layer of understanding to them, I think that makes them infinitely scarier. So like my prime example would be like Smog.
Right.
When I guess the coalition of wizards are in Rivendell and they're like, well, we have to take care of this Smog situation because if Smog joins the enemy, if he joins the Dark One, it's like he's a free agent. He can make
Mm.
this choice, which is so interesting to me that this creature is so powerful and frightening
Right.
that it has the option to choose which side it's on.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself is scary because it's not so easily controlled.
Mm. Yeah. So I'm not sure exactly where it began. So if we backtrack all the way to Beowulf. I don't know if you read Beowulf, how much you're familiar with it. Beowulf is
I've read, I want to say that I read at least a good portion of it in its original, translation. So it's been a minute and it was not an easy read. I also
right.
read a graphic novel version of it when I was in like middle school and I loved that.
Okay. So if you go back to Beowulf, it's the oldest English poem,
Right.
epic poem, that we've got in existence to our knowledge that has still been preserved on some levels. Um, the dragon there, so this is written, I don't know, somewhere around, I want to say 1,000-ish years ago, maybe 1,500 years ago, but I think closer to the 1,000 mark, 1,000 to 1,380, something like that. And the dragon in there is, as you said, it's just kind of an animal. It's got a territory. And so Beowulf is going to go try to kill the dragon that is harassing this space. He's an animal. You go to Tolkien. Now, Tolkien really did change the whole fantasy landscape because at the time, I just finished reading a biography on Tolkien.
Okay.
At the time, there wasn't such a thing as we have of adult science fiction and fantasy. Maybe somewhat on a science fiction scale, but even that wasn't like, I mean, we're dealing with 1930s into 1950s. And so when he wrote The Hobbit, it was originally designed for children, which if you've read The Hobbit and you've read Lord of the Rings, you can see the tone difference.
That's why they
Um,
still recommend Hobbit in like middle school reading
exactly.
lists, but they're probably not
Yes.
going to assign you the rest of the trilogy.
Correct. So he wrote The Hobbit still with children as a primary audience, and that is what people expected. Dragons and fantasy was for children. He made a tone shift when he wrote The Lord of the Rings. And he wrote that, I mean, over a process of years and years and years and years and years. And his publishers were like, "Yeah, I don't like this. This is going to sell for kids." And he just kept pushing of like, "But this is the story." And so he definitely began kicking off this trend of adult fantasy. Then you can go to people like Anne McCaffrey. So she wrote the Pern universe. Harper Hall of Pern is what I read this year. But her Pern universe is all about these dragons, and that's in the 1970s. So a couple years or so, decade plus after The Lord of the Rings is officially published, she begins writing her stories of dragons and people who ride dragons. And dragons, they actually kind of function almost like cats and dogs. They're
Hmm.
humans' best friends, and they talk to them, but you don't necessarily get talking back from the beasts. But the humans are talking to the dragons and communicating. Obviously, we fast forward down the road, you get to things like Aragon, where now you've got a mental link between dragon and rider. And that has now become since Aragon in the early 2000s, that has now become much more standard. When dragons are in books, they communicate through some level of mental connection.
Yeah, I was just sort of thinking about, like, because obviously there's stuff like How to Train Your Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
My brain, for some reason, I was thinking to myself, I was like, so in my own Bible reading right now, I'm in Revelation again. I'm almost
Yeah.
done through a whole read through, and it just occurred to me. I was like, I wonder what the translation or concept that would have been floating around when John wrote Revelation, like what the concept of a dragon even constituted, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. Because
Sure.
that dragon does have sort of its own personality, because it
Yes.
represents, it's like an, obviously since it's apocalyptic, it's elevated literature. So instead of just a serpent in a garden, you have this massive serpent dragon with multiple heads. It's like, how do you make a snake
Mm-hmm.
worse? Give it wings, give it a bunch of heads, make it
Right.
massive. Like, how do you
Right.
make it worse? So I was just thinking to myself, I don't know what the actual answer to that would be, of like, what did people, because the actual concept of a dragon, that's more of a medieval concept of, like, I guess maybe that's more where it became popular. But I wonder what the whole mental image of a dragon would have been back when John wrote Revelation.
Yeah. So I mean, let's think about sea monsters for a moment.
Okay.
Um, right. Sea monsters were essentially the same concept of dragon. You're talking serpentine-like body, a scaly texture, sharp teeth, tail. That's been around for, yeah, thousands of years.
Hmm.
You go back to ancient Near Eastern mythology, which is what I'm trying to specialize in some of my own research. So this is Hebrew, this is Canaanite, this is Hittite, this is this ancient Near East, Phoenician. Um, yeah, you go to this, they have these creatures. Rahab, Rahav, however you want to pronounce her name, is this goddess dragon-like character. Tiamat is, again, a goddess sea monster-like character. But if you were just trying to come up with a generic name, you would probably use the term dragon. It's a water dragon. That's what a lot of these ancient gods were. So, yeah, I mean, it's been around a long time. And even those, these gods and goddesses, these sea monsters, they have a heart and a mind of their own. The ability to speak, like I said, I think that is much more Tolkien and beyond. I'm not sure how many other stories there are of talking dragons, but certainly these creatures, these monsters, these dragons, they have a thought process. They are intellectual enough to make decisions.
Right. And that's just so, like, I just think that's fascinating to me, is that the way that you make a creature scarier is that you make it like a human, in the sense
Mm-hmm.
that it's got reasoning behind what it does, in like this sort of kingly fashion, where
Right.
it hoards gold and it, like, pens itself up inside a keep or a cave like its own domain. And
Yeah.
somehow that's it, I mean, it's so much worse. It's like combining the wild beasts, just this bestial strength, with the cunning and sinister nature of like an evil king.
Right. But I mean, we know what evil people are like, and evil
Right.
people use weapons, they use manipulation. So now let's give those weapons and manipulation in the forms of fire and claws and fangs. And let's give them all of the physical muscle and power. And yeah, that's like, can you imagine Adolf Hitler as a massive 90-foot dragon?
Yeah.
Like like
I,
that's yeah. How do we make something scarier? Make it an evil human in the form of a dragon body.
and I think along with its power is, a lot of times, even if it's only speaking or communicating like telepathically, it's giving it the ability to speak makes it
Yes.
creepier and worse. It gives such, like, power and poison to what it says.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's sort of like that elevated idea of, like, the devil, of just the serpent. It can talk to you, and it can
Right.
play on your fears and your insecurities, and it can try to lie to you about what you want and all this stuff. And it's such a powerful concept to use for, like, you can have heroic dragons, or evil dragons. And I just think
Right.
I like the fact that you can have either or. Because I think a lot of times in media now, you can almost have like a hierarchy where there's maybe the figurehead Drake, who's like the leader of the dragons, and then maybe there's like wyverns or something that are like
Right.
lesser and they don't have the mental capabilities, but you almost have like a figurehead for the dragons who's like the leader. And if he's good, great. If he's bad, you better watch out.
Yes. Yes, that's definitely on brand.
So, I'm going to shift over to something that I saw today. There was one YouTube video that was recommended to me a while ago that I was unfamiliar with, and I'm just curious to see if you have heard of this story. The man's name, if I get this right, is Anatoli Bugorski.
Okay.
Are you familiar with this name?
No, name's not ringing the bell.
Okay, so I will read to you from this article. It's very fascinating. So are you familiar with Phineas Gage, the guy who had the copper pipe launched through his head that everybody had to learn about in biology class or psychology?
If I did, I've definitely forgotten that.
Okay, that's actually really funny and ironic. It was a case where I think this was pre-lobotomy, but they realized that the physical makeup of the brain could be physically altered or sustain traumatic injury, and that would have an impact on the personality of the person that would happen to. So Phineas Gage was like, he had like a piece of copper pipe shoot like up under his jaw and behind one of his eyes and exit his head. And from that point on, he survived, but he had a completely different personality. And so that's when people were like, okay, so the physical makeup of the brain, like if certain things get damaged in a certain part of the brain, it has XYZ trickle down effect. So like
Gotcha.
that's when they figured out like, oh, like if a part of your brain gets damaged or destroyed, that will change your personality. And this is a little bit more insane. So I will read from the article, and if you want me to stop at any point, just let me know if you have any questions. So I will read from the article. Particle accelerators are machines that propel charged particles at incredible speeds, generally to collide with other particles. It's highly advisable that the particles the highest speed particles collide with should not be part of your head, as one man learned the hard way. On July 13th, 1978, particle physicist Anatoli Bugorski, I don't think there's an R in there, was working at his job in the U-70 synchrotron, which, by the way, is an awesome name, the largest particle accelerator in the Soviet Union. The 36-year-old was inspecting a piece of equipment that had malfunctioned when the accident happened. Unbeknownst to him, several safety mechanisms had also failed, meaning that when he leaned over to get a good look at his task, a proton beam shot through the back of his head at close to the speed of light. Or at least closer to the speed of light than you'd like a proton beam to be traveling at when it shoots clean through your face. At first, he felt no pain. He knew what had happened as he had seen a light, in quotes, brighter than 1,000 suns, as well as the gravity of the situation. At this point, he didn't tell a soul and merely completed the day's work before heading home and waited for the inevitable to happen. Absorbing 5 grays, that's 500 rads of radiation, would usually lead to death. Though he didn't yet know it, he had been hit with between 2,000 to 3,000 grays, which is 200,000 to 300,000 rads. In the night, his face began to swell beyond recognition, prompting him to visit the doctors the following morning. From there, he was taken to a clinic in Moscow, though largely so that his death could be observed rather than for any expectation that his life could be saved. Next few days, skin peeled off around the entry and exit wounds, showing a clean path burned right through his skin, skull, and brain. Remarkably, he did not die. The brain tissue continued to burn away over the ensuing years, and his face became paralyzed on the left side, where his hearing was also lost. Weirder still, as he aged, the right side of his head showed signs of aging, while the left side did not. Over the next few decades, he experienced seizures but remained functional, continued his work as a physicist, and completed a PhD. As far as people who have put their heads into a particle accelerator go, and to be fair, that's a demographic of a 1, he was pretty lucky. The narrow focus of the beam, though it caused massive damage, likely kept the damage limited to an area of the brain that he could live without. For the decade after this incident, he was unable to tell anyone about it, given the notorious secrecy of the Soviet Union. He survived well beyond the end of the USSR. However, in fact, the man who put his head in a particle accelerator and lived to tell the tale remains alive to this day.
I've not heard this.
So a man had something at almost the speed of light rocket through his head and lived.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane to me.
I mean, it is. It is.
Like, that could have gone so much worse.
Yeah, as he expected it to.
I mean, yeah, like, what would your expectation be? Like, he said in the moment, I mean, he didn't feel much pain, but he knew exactly what happened. So, like, and the fact, I thought that this was a relatively recent thing that happened. I didn't know that it was in Russia, first of all, but I also didn't know that it took place in the 70s. When I saw this, there was a video, and I kept seeing the thumbnail for it recommended on YouTube. I just assumed that it was somewhat recent because I didn't realize that particle accelerators have been around that long.
Well, I mean, much like the planetarium, certain companies are certainly not going to share their top secret research.
No, of course not. That's one thing. I don't know if I've talked about this. I don't think I've ever talked about this on the podcast. I watched like a 3-hour long video essay on the first chess computer that beat the chess champion way back when, whose name is escaping me. The machine was called Deep Blue. You've probably heard about it. But basically, during one of the matchups between Deep Blue, the chess computer, and one of his human opponents, the computer made a very strange move, and it actually rattled the chess champion's confidence because he was like, uh-oh, is the computer seeing and noticing something that I'm not? And it was like years after the fact that the people who created Deep Blue came out and was like, oh no, that was a mistake. It was a glitch basically in the system. But it completely rocked the other guy's confidence because he thought that the computer was seeing something that he didn't. But after the fact, they were like, no, we had made some code changes that morning, and it just made like a really dumb move. But that whole thing. Do you get into video essay stuff at all? Do you watch video essays?
No, I've not really gotten into video essays.
I want to start making them because I find them very interesting.
Yeah.
I think it sort of speaks to the same thing like when you're in high school and you have to read certain books. It's just sort of drudgery. But then after you get out of school and you can read whatever the heck you want, that's when I really developed my love of reading, was once I was freed up to read what I wanted, and the book choices that were made were for me, and it wasn't for like an assignment, or it wasn't because I was going to have to eventually write a paper on it. I feel very much the same about how people my age and older have started making video essays, multiple hour-long videos on just a topic that they're passionate about. And I think it just sort of speaks to that same thing of like, if you're given the option to make an essay on something that you like, more than likely you're going to put more time and effort into it rather than if it was just assigned, and you might not be as passionate about it.
And the flexibility of no designated due date. I think that is a big boost, right? So I'll do something I love and take the time I want to research. And hey, if I want to take a break and do something else, I can do that. And then I'll go back to this thing I love. School typically gives you something you don't like, and it gives you a time frame. So yeah, I'd say that very much echoes what you're saying. When you've got flexibility and passion, that's the better key.
So I went on, there's a couple websites that I found that tell you, you know how people make these ridiculous lists of like, there's a holiday every day?
Yes.
And I mean, the list is just insane. I mean, even for today, the website that I'm looking at has so many listed as being on October 20th, which is when this is being recorded. But the first one that I saw that just sort of made me chuckle to myself is Conflict Resolution Day.
Oh, good.
And I love that. But
yeah, I'm sure it's inspired by Parks and Recreation.
Exactly. So my thing is, here at this company, every once in a while, I will ask whoever I'm talking to on this podcast to help me make something better, make an improvement, invent something new. So
Okay.
I wanted to hear from you, like, obviously, around Christmas time, there are certain traditions, spoken and unspoken, that people take part in, whether it's hot chocolate, hanging multicolored lights, or chopping down a tree in a forest and putting it in your house. All these things that, from the outset, are pretty hilarious. And if
Sure.
an alien landed on our planet and observed our Halloween like traditions that people do, or
Right.
any holiday, really, I think it's just sort of funny. So my question is, how can we make Conflict Resolution Day? What can we do to either add some decoration, add something? Like, what do you think should constitute Conflict Resolution Day?
Yeah. So the first thing I think about conflict resolution, I tend to think of workplace environment
Right,
and
right, right.
like a training. I think if you participate in conflict resolution day, you should be able to sign up online, say that you have completed conflict resolution, and then you will be mailed a certificate testifying to your completion of conflict resolution day.
So, so it's like I'm not going through this day for nothing. I'm doing it for a certification. Is it
Yes,
something that
because people love badges, they love certifications. Like, so now you can post this on your wall, Conflict Resolution Day 2022, and maybe there's even a flexibility where you can put what you resolved, and you could put finally,
Oh.
drove away deer from bird feeder. Um,
Oh.
you can list in bullet point form all of the conflicts you resolved on Conflict Resolution Day.
I love that. I love the whole concept of it's like a an inspection sticker that you have to get updated every year. I
Yeah,
also
every year.
my mind just goes to like in a workplace setting, having just a bewigged judge like enter a room like with an old style English judge.
Yes, yes.
Like everybody has to sit down in a conference room and a podium is brought up and it becomes an impromptu courtroom and basically any qualms, any quibbles that there are in the office just get hashed out publicly.
Yep, doesn't matter if it's small, doesn't matter if it's big, we're ready to do it all.
This is the court case. This is Bobby versus Don on eating his cake that was in the company fridge.
Mm-hmm.
If you do
And
not
again,
have a lawyer, one will be given to you.
I am sure people like Ross from Friends would have absolutely loved Conflict Resolution Day of who ate his sandwich.
I also just think it would be funny if you got other employees who had to act the parts of other people in a courtroom. So you get someone to be the stenographer, one person to be the bailiff, two people to act as like the defense attorneys,
Yes.
like the lawyer, and like even if you're coming in ice cold, it's your first day, you don't know what the heck is going on. You just see all this court in like equipment being wheeled into the room and people are
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh boy, you picked a good day to show up. It's conflict resolution day." And just
Yes, it's
the
perfect.
CEO just Michael Scott walking out in a giant white wig in a robe pounding a
Yes.
gavel. That would be so much fun.
Yes. It provides a sort of lightness to the work atmosphere, and you do get a certificate.
Mm. Exactly. You get a little prize. Who doesn't love that?
I mean, isn't
Uh
that one of these TikTok trends right now? Is like, I need a little treat. Like this is what people want, right? They do something hard, they get a reward. So
right. So it's
resolve your
almost like
conflict, get a
it,
reward.
it's a little bit like what we do with my dad with his bad dad jokes is that he we let him store them up for Father's Day. We're like, save it for
Ah,
Father's Day. We see that look in your eye. You just found a stinker. You got to hold on to that one and wait until Father's Day before you're allowed to give us that specific dad joke. So it's a little bit like that.
nice.
It's like you can't have a public issue with someone else's behavior until conflict resolution day, where it all just pours forward
Right,
like a
right.
torrent.
Yes.
That's amazing. I love that. What's something have you seen anything on the internet recently that just made you happy, made you smile, or you thought was really cool?
I can, hey, if it's on the internet, I can give you things that make me grumpy. Um, Man, things that make me smile or that I think are cool. I need to get on the happier side of the internet, it seems.
It would appear so. Hey, but I'm right there with you, honestly. Like there are days where I'm just like I need like a detox, you know? I I think I've definitely talked about this with other people before, but pretty much any creative person like on Instagram, what
Mm-hmm.
always makes me super happy as an artist is whenever I see someone who like drawing original characters is like their thing. Like they just love creating characters. I
Yeah.
love it. Absolutely love it when they take two of their OCs and have them together and like I love it when you can have this creative space. So like
Yeah.
Smash Brothers, where all these disparate characters can come
Right.
together under the same creative roof for
Yeah.
some reason. And I think this sort of, I mean, it's happening a lot in media anyways with the whole multiverse trend.
Exactly. Right.
But this whole idea of sort of bringing everyone together, regardless of the rules that it could potentially break, just sort of having fun with it. I just love when random characters that just don't belong, just super realistic characters and super
Mm-hmm.
cartoony, wacky characters,
Right.
like inhabiting the same space for a common goal is just so cool to me.
Yeah. So that prompts two things in my mind. The first thing, what I love about that is often when you bring things that don't really belong together, I like a unique format change. So
Hmm.
what I mean by that is there was an episode, I believe it was of Supergirl. So Supergirl, I forget what it originally aired on. It was then bought by CW, and I think it's Supergirl. Is it Superwoman? Whichever it is. I think it's Super. Anyways, um, so she and the Flash then began doing crossover episodes that tied into the Arrowverse at the time. This is like several
Crossover
years ago.
episodes. I love
Yes,
crossover
right. So
episodes.
crossover episodes. But what I particularly love is then when you make it a unique twist. So there was a musical episode because both the character who plays the Flash, Grant Austin, I think, if the name's coming correctly to my
That
head,
sounds right.
and the girl who played Supergirl, Superwoman, they were both on Glee together at one time.
Oh, okay.
And so they said, "Hey, we've got the talent," and they made a musical episode of this show of superheroes, right? So like, I love that unique twist. Supernatural did this. I've actually not watched this yet, but where it became a Scooby Doo episode, and so Sam and Dean Winchester have to partner with the Mystery Gang, and it is filmed in Scooby Doo cinematography.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, that's so good.
right. So like I love that unique twist. You talk about, Smash Brothers and these characters coming together. I love it when not only are they coming together, but they're coming together in a completely different format. I think that
Hmm.
is so fun.
I remember there was an episode of the TV series Monk that they
Mm,
filmed a black and white version and an in color version
right.
because the setup was very film noir. The entire episode doesn't really follow that format, but they did an
Mm,
entire episode in black and white. And it was kind of interesting behind the scenes, like before the episode that you can select from the disc, there's two different actors that talk about, they like sort of make a case for why they like it in color or in black and white better. And it's
right.
sort of interesting where it's like you can watch the same thing in a different format and it's the way it's done is just so fascinating because
Yeah.
so like as an example, I just finished watching through Better Call Saul with my dad
Hmm.
and Vince Gilligan loves using black and white. But the thing is that one of the things that he's known for is his use of color and
Mm,
how he uses color to invoke certain things, remind you of certain things, or telegraph certain things. So
yeah.
even down to like the filter that he uses over the screen, whatever base color is on that filter, you can kind of get a sense of either place or which character you're following. And
Mm,
so to have him directorially removing a bunch of tools from your tool belt voluntarily, going black and
right.
white for large portions of the show, I think is just sort of a way that he can sort of just show off his ability to make something captivating in just
Mm.
black and white.
So I think this goes to the creative power of saying if you have something good, you don't need to rely on all the bells and whistles to keep it good. And I
Hmm.
think that's what I love about, yes, a director who can take something that they wouldn't usually do, and basically, yes, I mean, and this is, for, um, I don't know, wrestlers, athletes, whatever. When it's like, yeah, tie a hand behind my back. Well, why would you do that? Well, I can prove to you, I am still superior, even handicapped.
Right.
And I think,
Yeah.
yeah, if you can do that as a director and say, you know what, I'm going to take away some of the flashy technology we have today, or I'm going to take away the use of color that I'm known for, um, and you still put out a good product. I think that is just it speaks to the creative mind.
I just love like practical effects whenever I
Yeah,
see it. Makes me so happy. I'm like, oh, they didn't CGI that. They did that. They actually blew up that room like in
right.
real like that stuff makes me so happy. It just looks so good.
Yeah.
Well, I will leave you to your research. I think we're gonna wrap this up. I'm still looking for the exit. So in this glorious planetarium, if by any chance in your sojourns through this infinitely tall building, if you happen to come across an exit, just let me know. Just drop me a line or something like that. I was gonna go get some snacks from the vending machine, but apparently now it's full of names written on paper, and I'm
I
not
was
really sure I want to
wondering.
take one.
I was wondering why I found my name lying on a table. Um, that's a little disturbing to think someone thought I was a snack.
Well, then again, yeah, you may just want to keep your head on a swivel because if someone drew your name, I don't know what that means at all. No
I
idea.
don't either. You better watch your back.
Yeah, I've tried to. I got lost 17 times getting here, and I gotta be honest, I don't know how I'm getting out.
Well, I mean, I haven't found my way out, so I can't help you too much.
Well, if you find anything interesting out in space, let me know.
I will do that 100%.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening. Bye.